I've got a great guest today. It's the prolific and talented author Jonathan Tropper. And we're going to be talking to him about his highly successful novel, which debuted in hardcover last year, This Is Where I Leave You. It has just been released in paperback by Plume Publishing, a division of Penguin Books. I did have the pleasure of interviewing Jonathan in August of last year, and he had just sold the movie rights for the book and now is currently working on the screenplay. And I am so pleased to have him back. Jonathan, welcome to my show, and thanks for being here.
Hi, Jacqueline. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Oh, believe me, it's my pleasure. I love your work. I've read every one, and I can hardly wait for the movie. Now, am I right that this Is Where I Leave You is your fifth novel?
Yes.
Okay, so give my audience the overview of this terrific story.
Well, the story basically starts out following a guy named Judd Judd Foxman, mixing up characters. Judd Foxman, who is about 35 years old and comes home to find his wife in bed with his boss. He effectively loses his job, his wife, and his home all on the same day. And while he's kind of struggling to figure out who he is without a career and a marriage and a home, he gets the news that his father has died, and he has to go back to his father's home where he grew up and sit Shiva with his three other adult siblings and his somewhat wacky mother. And this is a family that was raised in a godless house. There was no religion in the house, and none of them quite understand why their father has left this last request behind, that they sit Shiva for him. But you have these four adult siblings who don't particularly get along and who have a lot of issues with each other, suddenly forced to spend 7 days in their childhood home with their wives and kids and girlfriends and their mother, and just basically spend 7 days getting in each other's faces.
A great concept. And for my listeners who may not be familiar with the Jewish tradition of a Shiva, could you please explain what it is?
Yeah, there's a Jewish custom that when a member of your immediate family dies, the immediate family comes together in the house of the deceased, although not always, and basically sit on low chairs as a symbol of mourning while extended family members, friends, and members of the community come to visit you. And it's just this, and it's a 7-day custom, although some people have trimmed it to 3 days. But it's basically a chance for you to sort of be comforted by your friends and your overall community to sit there and receive visitors, and it's sort of a transitional time as you're mourning and getting used to the world without this person that you've just lost.
Well, now you said that originally, or some people still do it for 7 days, but others cut it down to 3. What's the significance of the 7 days of mourning?
I'm not sure. I think 7 is a religiously significant number in the number of religions, and maybe because 7 days is a full week, and they take you through a full week of just the first week of your bereavement, and
right.
I don't really know why it's 7. But.
Well, and certainly I would think it would have been a lot tougher, maybe not for you, but to create this wonderful story over 3 days as opposed to 7 days.
And the truth is, in the neighborhood where I live, when Jewish people sit Shiva, they tend to do it for the full 7 days. But I've been to many places where they don't, and I needed 7 days.
Yes, absolutely, and you did it beautifully.
Yeah.
Now, you had said previously that your novels are character-driven. I'm going to say the same thing. I'm repeating myself. I said last year, and I still think so, reading it again. That scene where he comes in and finds his wife in bed with the boss, it's the funniest, saddest, and at the same time, most shocking and attention-getting few pages that I have ever read. Now, did you start with that thought of how you created it? And I certainly have never given it away to anybody what actually happens, and I won't today.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of the culmination of that scene, the way it kind of ends and descends into a quick violent outburst that we won't reveal here.
Right.
That was not my plan when I wrote it. That sort of just came to me in the moment.
Is that right?
Yeah, but I basically what I wanted to do with that scene is have him walk in, and instead of making it sort of a sexy scene or a disturbing scene or in any way a cliche scene, because, we've all heard the story and told the jokes about how someone came home and found their wife or husband in bed with someone else, is to actually slow down time and really go through moment by moment what the thought process is of a man who walks into his bedroom and discovers this, because he didn't come home expecting it.
Well, that's right.
Yeah, and so basically I just stop time, and I every little bit that he sees, every little bit that he thinks, it's all in there. And so what it turned out to be is it's not a sex scene at all, even though there's a naked couple having sex in there. It's really more like a train wreck.
And it's
Just
brilliant.
this guy watching every one of his senses taking in the fact that his life has just been destroyed.
Really. Now, I know you're working on the script, and we'll talk about that a little further on, but I hope that scene is going to be in the movie.
It is.
Oh, great.
It's in there.
That's going to be fun shooting that one. Now, of course, this family is described as dysfunctional.
Not by me.
Not by you, but by some of your critics.
Yeah.
But it's very apparent that as bizarre as some things might get, the characters and the events in the book still feel very, very real. And it's always difficult for authors to talk about how the writer does it. But talk about that point in your character development and the ability to, well, you're a brilliant writer, obviously, but that's so important in your character development. How do you get there? How do you get to that point?
Well, what it is this is, I've written about families before, but really with only a focus on one or two people within the family, and everyone else was just sort of there for a little bit. This was the first time I had to really create 4 fully fleshed out siblings and a mother, and really make them all working pieces in this novel. And so what I did was I just tried to come up with a dynamic, like how was this family raised? What were the parents like? What was it like growing up in this house? And thinking about it that way, I then thought, now, if you're the oldest kid in this family, which in this case is the daughter Wendy, you're the oldest. You've got this mother who has no filter and who talks about everything. You've got this father who's kind of introverted. Like, how do you grow up? And then how does the younger brother grow up? And I just sort of I created kind of a blueprint for the family, and then I just spent a lot of time on each character, sort of honing the way they speak to sort of fit in with that kind of mentality. So
now, do you use people either
Never.
their foibles or their quirks and so forth?
No, I mean, obviously you can't negate the influence that people have. I don't consciously do it, but certainly, maybe, if I have a friend or if I meet somebody who uses a certain expression that I think is kind of helps to sort of define who they are, I may give that expression to a character because I feel it will help. Flesh out that character.
Right.
Like I'm sure that goes on a lot, but it's not something that you're very often conscious.
Right. Now, the overleaf of the hardcover book referred to the work as, quote, emotionally raw. Where does the rawness come from within you or your experiences?
Yeah, well, that's sort of been my mission as a writer to some extent, is I always feel somewhat unfulfilled, even though I could read a book that's masterfully written, if the writer gets to the part that, is about sex or is about violence or is about some of the grittier parts of it and sort of embellishes it with sort of beautiful prose that doesn't really sink into the grittiness of it, I always feel a little bit robbed.
Uh-huh.
And my goal when I write these books is to present them in a completely to present whatever emotion or whatever kind of episode I'm trying to portray, to present it in its most honest form, even if it's somewhat uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's why, a lot of people talk about that scene where he walks in on his wife and they're like, I can't believe you wrote that.
Oh, I believe it.
Like,
I love it.
This is what it would really feel like to me. This is, how would I feel if I walked in on this? I wouldn't be, writing, some
sophisticated and
some beautifully
you got it.
Flashback about when they first met and now it's all over. I would be, this guy would be fixated on the two asses on his bed.
Absolutely. Well, this is the Jacqueline Bachar Show, and for those of you just tuning in, I'm talking to novelist Jonathan Tropper about his latest book, now in paperback. This is Where I Leave You. It's been released by Plume Publishers, a division of Penguin Books. Now, before we go too far, I do want to ask you about how you are working on the script, for those of you just tuning in. You're working on the script now. I know
I've actually finished this.
Oh, great! Well, and I'm assuming you're very, very happy with it. But I want to ask the question: how did the writing of the script differ from the creation of the novel, and what was the most challenging part of writing the script?
Well, I've written scripts before, but I've never adapted one of my own novels before, and it was, in retrospect, it certainly was harder than I expected it to be. This one in particular, which is so episodic, which takes place over 7 days, having to turn that into a 3-act structure, that follows the emotional, pattern of a movie where there's conflict, there's building, there's climax, there's resolution. You can't really make it episodic the way it is in the book, and so I had to really, cut and massage and sort of restructure things to fit the pace of a movie. And that was harder than I thought. And the other thing that was a little harder than I thought was simply being trapped by some of the assumptions that were left from the book. At one point, after I'd written a draft, I sat down with the director and we were going through it, and he said, I need this scene here to happen 35 pages earlier. I want this to happen here.
Oh, my.
And then I said to him, but if I do that, I can't do that because all of these things have to happen before then. And he just looked at me and he says, well, why? And the only reason was because that's how it happens in the book.
Yeah,
but there was no reason from a movie perspective why that scene had to happen. Like things like that just take a little time to adjust to.
Sure. Who's the director, by the way?
Right now the director is Greg Berlanti at Warner Brothers.
Uh-huh.
And he's got a movie coming out in a little while called Life as We Know It, which is getting a lot of good buzz.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And, so I've been working with him on it.
Now, has it been cast yet?
Nope, it has not been cast yet. They're starting to dance around that now.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting. Do you have any say about that? Can you offer an opinion?
I'm sure I can offer an opinion, but do I have any say?
I know. Do you?
Yeah, I'm sure I can offer an opinion, but I don't have any.
But they'll just say, "Well, I'm going to try not to picture who I think should play the lead, and then I won't be disappointed either." But because sometimes that does happen. But the fact that you've written the script. And it was your novel, I think that's going to make it even more interesting.
I hope so.
Yeah, well, I hope so, too. I want to mention, too, that I had, Peter Hedges on recently.
Yeah, he's a good friend of mine.
Yeah, about his book, The Heights.
Yeah.
And I asked him about, he had written the script for one of your novels. Which one was that?
Everything Changes.
Oh, I love that one too. Oh gosh. Well, I couldn't name my favorite one. I'm just a huge fan. Now, has that film? Is it in production? Has it been released?
It is not in production.
Oh darn!
I don't know. They're having issues. I mean, it's very hard these days in Hollywood to get a character-driven movie made.
It is.
I mean, even that project, which had a movie star attached and has a great writer and director in Peter Hedges, it's just. The studios right now, it's just very hard to get anything that isn't a major genre film.
They need the blockbuster, don't they?
Yeah. So the truth is, in retrospect, all of these films would have a better chance if we just did them independently. But that's got its own pitfalls. So.
And during the break, I was chatting with Jonathan, and he told me that the book has just made the best-selling list of the New York Times. And I want to congratulate you on air, Jonathan. That is really exciting.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Yes, I've waited a long time to hit that list.
Yes, you have. Yes, you have. So we're very happy for you.
Thank you.
Now, we had been talking about the writing of the script and how that differs. And you had said that you, of course, had worked on scripts before. I seem to recall, I know Peter Hedges mentioned it to me, and several writers have said that working on a script actually helps them in their writing. Do you feel that way about your writing, or do you feel...
Oh, Gosh, I don't even know what they mean.
Okay, I wondered about. I mean, they
Yeah,
do.
I don't know
Yeah.
why. I mean, what I like about it is it's just a chance to use different muscles. Like, I've written 4 scripts in the last year, and you do that, and then you go back to writing prose and novel writing, and it's just very different. And I guess it's a great way to kind of rest certain muscles while you flex others.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't necessarily find the act of screenwriting helps me with the act of novel writing. So I'd love to. I'll ask Peter what he meant by that.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure he was the one that said it. I've got him on CD, so I'll double check that. But most of the authors do say that. Now, you mentioned that you've worked on 4 scripts. Now, that's counting this one, right? This is where I leave you. Did you work on any other of your novels for movies?
No, I mean, I
did a while,
not in the past year. No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll go on to talk about your book. One question that I certainly want to ask you is that you really do seem to have your pulse on families in your books. What are you saying about this family or American families in general?
Well, I think what troubles me is when people sort of like to use the catchphrase, "It's a dysfunctional family."
Yeah.
I actually don't find this family to be at all dysfunctional. I find some of the people in the family to be struggling. But the fact is, to me, a dysfunctional family is not a family where some of the people don't get along. That to me is every family. To me, a dysfunctional family would be that the father died and 2 of the 4 kids don't bother showing up for the funeral because they don't speak to each other. So to me, this isn't a dysfunctional family at all. What I find interesting is that no matter how you go out into the world and build your life and whatever you accomplish, when you come home to your family, you're still that person that grew up there, for better or worse.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a certain amount of regression that happens when you get together with your family.
That is so true.
And I've come from trips out in LA where I'm working with big directors and big movie stars, and then I'll come home to a get together at my parents' house, and I'm still the idiot who grew up there. I'm not and that's good and it's grounding, but at the same time there's a certain amount of regression that happens. And to me, what fascinates me about families is how the patterns of how you all relate to each other are set so early on, and it's so hard to break them.
That's interesting. That's very interesting the way you put it, and I'm so glad that you said what you said about the use of dysfunctional families. I really feel like you that it's overdone. I mean, is there any family that any of us know that is so perfect? How boring that would be. I mean, we love each other, we dislike each other, we fight, we argue, but we come back together again, and that's a family, period. So,
right.
Yeah. Now, again, I want to talk to you about your ability to capture both men and women so genuinely. Not too long ago, I interviewed Chris Cleave about his book, Little Bee. Are you familiar with that book?
Haven't read the book. I know the book. I haven't read it.
It's a charming book, and I was struck by his ability to capture women characters, and I don't feel with all of the authors that I have interviewed that every writer has that ability or sensitivity to get inside a woman's head. And what is it about you and your writing that you are able to capture it so well as far as the woman character, but also the male character in this book, the sensitivity of the man you get to also. Are you a sensitive person? Do you find it somewhere inside yourself to...
Yeah, well, I think most people who are writers are a little more sensitive. I think a male writer is probably typically more sensitive than just a plain male.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's true to an extent. But as far as writing women or men, my rule of thumb so far, which has served me pretty well. I mean, I think I sometimes do it better than others when I'm writing women. There are some, I could look back at some earlier books and find some flaws in what I've done. But What I try to do is not treat them like a man or a woman, but really just treat them like a person.
Mm-hmm.
What is the damage of this person? What is this person's attitude? What is this person's means of expressing his or herself? And when I do that, it almost doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. And then then you do the superficial things you need to do to make it a man or a woman.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that's the trick, is to not think of them as a man or a woman, but just think of them as a person. I still get a lot of email from my book, The Book of Joe, which has been out for since 2004.
Yeah.
And a lot of people write to me and they say, "Oh, you wrote a gay character so well," because there's a gay character in the book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, well, that's because I didn't think of him as a gay character.
Right.
I just thought of him as a person in the book who I needed to get involved with.
Uh-huh.
I find that's the best way to do it.
Well, you do you've captured it. That's for certain. But I don't think other writers, a lot of writers, can take that same approach as you do. Now, again, we were talking about writing screenplays and that sort of thing. And I remember when I spoke to you last August. My goodness, it's almost a year ago. It is a year ago,
Indeed.
just about. Yeah. We had talked about your first screenplay that you wrote, which was Harvey, an adaptation of the Pulitzer Prize-winning play about an eccentric friendship with a 6-foot-tall rabbit that only the character sees. What happened with that one?
It's still in development. The script is done. They're happy with it. And I think right now Fox is doing a little director shopping. And they've got a movie star involved that, we're not supposed to talk about.
Oh, darn it.
They're still actively pursuing putting that together. Like I said, character-driven movies are always a little harder. But, they're still trying to put that together.
But they also, Hollywood also seems to like remakes of things. I guess it's because it's a known entity. And
well, in this case, I don't think that would be the case, only because the play was 1945.
Well, that's true.
The movie was 1950. The target movie market for this, probably 80 to 90% of them have not seen the original.
I forget about that. That's true. I mean, we see a lot of classic movies on our local television, and again, it's because a lot of stars are retired here, and so there's a lot of that is played, and of course the Jimmy Stewart movies are always played. But I do lose sight of that. Younger people don't know about a lot of these things and a lot of literature and everything. So
and even if I have found in my discussions with people in the year since I was associated with that project, that pretty much no one under the age of 50 has seen the movie, even if they know what it's about, even if they've heard of it, even if they've got some sort of visual image of Jimmy Stewart talking to an invisible rabbit. No one has seen the movie.
Isn't that an interesting fact? I don't know. Did that surprise you?
Well, look, I just turned 40. The only reason I had seen the movie is when I was a little kid. My father watched it, walked into his room to watch it with him. But, I wouldn't have seen it otherwise.
Yeah, I guess that's true. And everybody's involved. Maybe you've also got to do something that you can get on the net and on the web, and you'll have all this audience.
No, I think you could still get movies made. I just think it's a crapshoot, and it takes a lot longer than you'd like. But everything has to line up right. You have to get it to the right actor and the right director at the right time, and sometimes it'll sit for a few years, and then it'll be right, and other times it'll happen right away. And it's just, I think you just have to keep writing good material, and eventually something will click. Well,
someday maybe you'll get to the Palm Springs Film Festival. We got a lot of big celebrities here for that. It's become one of the most successful in the country, and Hollywood is always out here and sends their biggest stars and directors, and maybe we'll see you here sometime.
Huh?
But
I'll never say no.
Yeah, don't say no to that. You get a lot of exposure, additional exposure. I want to mention the fact, too, that, again, I'm talking to Jonathan Tropper, author of This Is Where I Leave You. And, Jonathan, you're on a book tour right now, and you've got something coming up in Los Angeles.
Yes, next week.
Yeah, that's the date of that is?
Yeah, the 29th on... What month are we in? July 29th.
Right.
I'm at Book Soup in Los Angeles, and the night before that, July 28th, I'm in Seattle at Elliott Bay Books.
Well, we do have a lot of listeners on the web, so there's probably people listening in from Seattle, and Elliott Bay Books is a really highly successful bookstore in Seattle. It's on 10th Avenue in Seattle, and Book Soup is on West Sunset Boulevard in Los Angeles, and that's a very successful bookstore, so I'm sure you're going to get a good turnout from that. Are you going to be reading or just signing, or what are you doing?
No, I talk and I read, and
good.
Do a lot of Q&A, and then I'll sign whatever anyone wants me to sign.
Yeah, so anybody that's either in Seattle or LA that wants to attend, they can contact the bookstores and find out what time you're going to be there and that sort of thing. And then come August, you're going to be back in New York. August 4th, you've got something.
Yeah.
Hello?
August 3rd, I'm in Boston, and August 4th, I'm doing an event at the Tribeca 92nd Street. I'm actually doing that event with Peter Hedges.
Are you? And Tribeca and Hudson Street in New York? Yeah. That's going to be terrific. That's going to be a good one. Well, you say hi to him for me if you think of it. Let's get back now to This Is Where I Leave You, an incredible book, and we've been talking to you about your scripting and your women characters and everything else. So I'm going to ask you another question about how you view the relationship between today's men and women. Now, you're in your 40s, so you're right there in amongst a population that seems to sometimes have trouble getting together with the opposite sex. What do you think about today's relationship?
I don't know. I've been married since I'm 26.
Yeah, so you're out of that picture, but
so I haven't really had to try that hard, anymore. But look, I think to some extent the getting. I don't think it's hard finding people. I think it's hard keeping people. I think,
right.
I think the world has just and also my point of view is obviously a city point of view. I grew up in New York, and I'm sure it's different out in Middle America or in smaller towns than it is in cities. But I think part of the casualness of it all, and part of this arrested development that we have, where we all want to grow up a little later, makes it harder to find people to stay in relationships with, because men seem to all of the characters in my books, people ask me why they're all sort of having these belated coming of ages, and I think it's because we've all sort of, as a society, we've started growing up later.
I think that's a very important point. And I don't think it matters whether these people are in New York or L.A. or where they are. There's a lot about speed dating and internet dating and even having trouble, as you say, you think the problem is hanging on to a relationship, but they seem to have trouble connecting with someone that they feel, whether it's a man or a woman, each is the other opposite sex is good enough for them. There seems to be a lot of that, too, that there's something better around the corner. Do you see that with your friends?
I'm really not an expert on it.
Yeah, okay. Well, no, because you're in a successful, wonderful marriage. And, we are out of time, Jonathan. I can hardly wait.
You ended by saying I'm in a wonderful marriage.
Yes, absolutely. And I can hardly wait for the movie version and, of course, your next book. And I'm hoping you'll come back when your next book is ready. Thank you so much for being here, Jonathan.
My pleasure.